Welcome to another edition of the Insider Mailbag. I'm Jared Johnson, and I've received several really good questions from inside the Red Raider subscribers. So I'm going to dive right into it as Texas Tech looks to take on TCU 2:30 p.m. Central Time Saturday in Fort Worth, and that game will be televised on Fox, I believe. So big game for the Red Raiders, and we have some good questions. BJ's My Hero says, how much worse is your job the week after a bad loss like Baylor? Yeah, it could be unpleasant because you have to talk about uncomfortable things. And the fact is, Tech has a lot of fans, thankfully. And the way people react to results are different. They are. And that's to be expected. But you have a lot of anger, especially right after the game. And then you have some people trying to defend it, I guess. Not a lot of people were trying to defend, uh, the 59-35 loss at home to Baylor. But I think just people act differently, and so there's no way you're not going to offend people with how you report following a result like that because people are just mad. So I just try and be uh, as upfront and honest as I could be about it and try and confront the reality of what we saw and what it means for the rest of the season and the team, the program going forward and all that. I always just try and be, real about it. And I feel like I've done that this week. I asked the coaches some questions. I think we're probably uncomfortable, but they're big boys. We're all big boys. I think we've discussed some of the issues, and I think it helps. I've been around for a while. People know where I'm coming from for the most part. So, uh, you know, I'm an optimist. I enjoy, talking about wins and how good the team is and all that, as opposed to recapping, such a difficult loss. But hey, I'm not digging ditches. I don't have it bad. I'm certainly not complaining. Elm Flat says, if Colorado can replace its whole team off the portal, how can Tech not improve a little? Well, Tech has improved through the portal. I mean, you look at its receiving core. Um, Cameron Douglas had 3 touchdowns last week alone. Josh Kelly is your leading receiver. You've been a good player. You've definitely upgraded your receiver core. Got some key offensive linemen who have been pretty good. I mean, the offense overall has been good. Is this a dominant offensive line? No, or anywhere close to that. But you have helped your team through the transfer portal. Devin Cromwell, who played really well against Arizona, I think he's a transfer portal addition. From Canada. And then Braylon Lux 2 years ago was a transfer portal addition. I get your overall point, but let's not. And I'm going to kind of talk about this some more, I think, moving forward in the mailbag. But let's not overblow. I mean, it was a terrible loss. It deserves tons of criticism, but Tech is still 5-2 overall and 3-1 in the Big 12. Now, I mean, that could snowball and get away from them, but that is the current reality of Texas Tech right now. RCMMHH95 says, how much did you dread making this post? I didn't dread it. I mean, there are some times during the off season where I step back and we don't do a mailbag. Just kind of take a break and get refreshed, rejuvenated, or whatever. But, during the season, I'm ready to answer these questions. I'm ready to talk about what needs to be talked about. And I feel like actually we received some good questions. A loss, especially after Tech won 4 in a row and there was all the success, a loss can really reveal some things like, all right, this is what's really going on. And some great discussion ensues, to be honest. All right. TTU in Colorado asked me if I'm still sticking with my preseason win total record after the Baylor debacle. That was a tough one because I was expecting that to be a win at home. I don't know why at this point, because the last 3 years it's been all road blowouts in this series. So that'll be interesting. See if Tech can keep that going next year, or next time they play. But no, I'm not changing it. I'm sticking with 8-4. They're 5-2 right now. That would mean, let's see, I'm not good at math, but they finished 3-5. Wait, 3-2 over the next 5, and I think it's possible. You got to win this game in Fort Worth against TCU. You have West Virginia at home. After TCU, you go to Iowa State. That looks very tough. I don't think it's impossible, but it looks tough. Iowa State and Ames. Colorado looks like it could be a tough matchup as well. But that at this point, you start getting so far away that you don't even know, who's going to get hurt, who's not, what these teams are going to look like, what kind of role they will or will not be on. West Virginia at home. I think right after Thanksgiving to end the season. Oklahoma State there the week before that. So Oklahoma State obviously is struggling, but it's there. These are winnable games, but I could see Tech losing all of them too. You know what I mean? I'm sticking with 8-4. That was my preseason prediction, and that's what I'm sticking with it as of now. But I have to be honest, this is a big one in TCU. You got to win this game to stay on track there. That would honestly, I think in the preseason had that as a loss, so that would make up for the Baylor loss for sure. TWLDS Raider says, is there a problem with the strength and conditioning program because the team looks skinny and weak at offensive line, defensive line, wide receiver, and DBs? Yeah, the DBs are younger. I mean, you could say some of the DBs are small. They're not as big as we were used to. I mean, you had 2 6'3" corners starting the last 2 seasons. So, excuse me, they are smaller at DB for the most, overall, but it's like Rabbit was giant or anything like that. Offensive line, I mean, you look at the average, it's pretty big. You got some younger guys stepping up there now. But, I mean, you have an average size offensive line. Defensive line, you have a bunch of big dudes. You could say they're playing soft, but I mean, you have like 315, 300, 305, across the board, and you're like 2 or 3 deep with that kind of size. So you're actually bigger on the defensive line in terms of length than you have been. Tony Bradford and Jalen Hutchings, while around 295 to 305 pounds between them or them each, but they were both like 6 foot. Didn't have really long wingspans, so I think you're actually bigger on the D line. And wide receiver, I mean, I think you're pretty big. Not giant, but you have some good size there. So I think during the 4-game winning streak, Tech looked a lot bigger and stronger. We were talking about how physical they were against Arizona State. You held Skataboo to well under his yards per carry average. I mean, he's looked downright dominant in some other games in their rushing attack, but you held up there against the run. I just think that Tech was playing slow. They were playing like they didn't know, especially on defense. I think the offensive line isn't great, isn't like terrific. I think it's better. It's pretty good. Goodish, as best I could say, but it's not very good. And I think you're young in some areas on defense, and they played slow because they were confused about the scheme and what they were doing in certain situations. And I talked to Coach Tim, defense coordinator Tim DeRuyter, about that Monday, and he explained, or just I asked him just who relays the calls on the field. It's on Inside the Red Raiders. There's a thread about it. But you can watch his press conference. It's the end of Tim DeRuyter's. I think it's the end of it's the end of Tim DeRuyter's press conference, or his part of it. But where I asked him about that, and it's a very complicated answer. So I'm not surprised that some of the guys are confused. Hopefully they simplify things and get more aggressive in terms of the rush, which I think I have a question about that coming up. Going to the other side of the ball, Saddle Tramp 80 says, explain Kidley. Am I the only one who thinks this guy is way in over his head? Are there folks out there besides this board that think that he is so one-dimensional and cannot evaluate offensive assets? Well, okay. So, no, you're not alone. Matter of fact, you want to go around town, people act like the defenses. Money Joe has detailed how the defense has struggled, like really in historic proportions this season, especially coming off the Baylor game. But what people want to talk to me about is that offensive coordinator. And what's crazy is that Tech's offense statistically has been pretty good. Now, I think compared to some of the standards we've seen set, by Mike Leach's teams, even Cliff Kingsbury's offensive teams, are so high, such a great offense that, I mean, us people, the fans and folks that follow Texas Tech football, have high standards for the offense. Um, but in terms of Kitley being one dimensional, I mean, I think he's actually doing a pretty good job adapting. I mean, Tech has been uh, pretty balanced in terms of running and passing. Now, like you listen to I talk to opposing journalists and people in the industry on teams that are going to face Texas Tech, that's one of the first things they bring up is just how balanced the offense is and how impressive that is, and how impressed they are by what Kitley's done. So how good Taj is. So I think people have a different perspective than what we do. I think he has been balanced. I think there's been some times where the offense is stalled, and ultimately that's on him as the offensive coordinator. Some of it, I mean, it's been some drop passes, and there have been some bad plays called, no doubt. But in terms of developing players, I mean, you look at Dalton Merriman playing left tackle, Sheridan Wilson at center, young guys who've developed. Taj Brooks has developed nicely under Zach Killey. I said that before. People said, "Oh, Taj was always good." Well, I mean, all I can say is that Taj has never gotten a heavier workload or played better than he has under Zach Killey. I mean, that's just a true story. So in terms of identify offensive assets, I mean, he's the guy who found Will Hammond before he even had a recruiting profile. I had him out here in Lubbock for a camp, watched him throw, made him an offer. I remember talking to Hammond about it right after. Like I said, I had to create his recruiting profile. He ended up being a 4-star Elite 11 finalist. So, I mean, that's pretty good talent evaluation. I know that's not what you want to hear. I know people have the pitchforks and torches, and that is, you're right. I'm not going around just trying to defend Zach Killey left and right, but there are several issues coming out the Baylor game with the program, with the team. I still think overall it's in good shape, and I can see it progressing, though it's not. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps. You know what I mean? Zach Killey is not at the top of my list. Now, going into the season, he was on my radar for sure, but I think he's actually done a pretty good job. And you asked me the question, and I know that may not be the answer you want, but that is my answer. Engines 53 said, of our freshman DBs, who has stood out in practice and what positions will they play? Yeah, he mentioned a couple of guys. Peyton Morgan and Malik Esquera are a couple of safeties that they got really close to getting some playing time against Cincinnati when you lost 3 free safeties, boom, 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 like that. I've heard good things about them. Of course, they're young, but the coaches have said good things about them. I'm not at the practice during season, so I don't get to see how they develop, but I have heard good things about them. Oliver Miles is playing star. Same thing. Very good things about him. They like all the 3 of those guys. They like their range and athleticism, speed. I really like Malik Esquera. I think Peyton Morgan's a dude that is the first guy people talk about, but I really like Esquera. I like this film from high school. So I like all those dudes. I think, a couple of years from now, if you could keep them on the roster, of course, in this day and age, but, some of these younger guys already thrown out there, and then the guys I just mentioned growing up. Ashton Hampton is a long corner, a taller corner, but he's skinny. That's something that Tim DeRuiter said relatively recently. He needs to add some weight, but that, in terms of speed and length and everything, that's there. So, but when these guys develop in a couple of years and they're older and they've been, in the weight room, training table, all that stuff, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of secondary Texas Tech has, because I think it could be really good. Final question comes from Syntax Red Raider, who asks, if we had so much success against Arizona with blitzing and the stunts, why did we decide to abandon that and drop 8 into coverage? Also, do you see Tech completely cleaning house with a new DC and new offensive coordinator? Well, to answer your second question first, no, I really don't. I think of the two, Tim DeRuiter, even though he's more established, I mean, the defense has been statistically really bad this year. So I think, again, going into the season, I would have never thought that. I would have thought, man, it's Kidley who's closer to being on the chopping block. But just how the season's played out, I mean, but I haven't heard anything about either one of them, you know, being on the hot seat, so to speak. I think that story is going to be told the rest of the season, to be honest. So that's interesting. Now, in terms of switching, abandoning a lot of the blitzing and stunts and everything, man, I don't know. That the 3-man rush and dropping 8, that was clearly the scheme. You know, the coaches said that they talked to some previous coaches about Baylor, and that was just the game plan. They weren't worried about, and McGuire said too, you know, wasn't worried about Baylor running the ball as much. It was more about defending the pass, and you know, it didn't work. And I even asked McGuire, like, you know, if you could do it over again, would you? And he basically said yes. But he even said that CJ Baskerville pulled him aside and said, "Hey, look, if 3 guys aren't getting home, aren't getting to the quarterback, and they're not a 3-man rush, then go ahead and send 4 or 5 and put it on us to cover." So I hope that is the game plan moving forward, because that's where this defense, at least this season, has been the most successful. So hopefully that's been scrapped and they're not going to play that except for maybe in some select situations, because you know, Baylor just carved Tech apart with that. It did not work. So hopefully that's out of here. But speaking of that, I'm out of here for this edition of the Mailbag. Great questions from everyone, and we'll be back next week, win or lose against TCU. But again, Red Raiders take on the Horned Frogs, 2:30 p.m. Central Time, Saturday in Fort Worth, and the game will be televised on Fox. For now, thank you for watching, and until next time.